Okay, let's unpack this. We spend so much time talking about why a business might fail. Bad strategy, new tech, poor market fit. But today, we are looking at something profoundly different, something that cuts right to the absolute core of whether you can even operate at all.
That's exactly right. This isn't a story of a commercial failure. It's the story of a fundamental, non-negotiable prerequisite for running a business being, well, violently stripped away.
And we have this incredible stack of source documents to go through, legal filings, internal statements like one called A Truth You Need to Hear,
Mm.
a police report from May 12, 2025, public messages. And they all point to one thing.
They do. And that one thing is really the mission of this deep dive. We want to extract the hard evidence, the causal link that proves this business closure wasn't a choice, not a commercial one anyway.
It was a mandated act of self-preservation, a shutdown driven, and the documents use this phrase, by weaponized intimidation.
Right. We're essentially tracking the chain of custody, so to speak, showing that the business effectively died the moment the founder's personal safety was gone. The sources basically established physical security as this unpriced but absolutely essential business asset.
And when it was stolen, the business just stopped. Instantly.
Exactly.
Now, before we really get into the weeds, we should probably clarify something for you listening globally. The documents keep mentioning individuals with ties to an OMC.
Right.
That stands for Outlaw Motorcycle Clubs.
Mm.
They're often associated with organized crime in the regions relevant to this case, and knowing that context, it really gives you a sense of the scale of the threat we're talking about here.
Oh, absolutely. It immediately moves it from, say, a personal dispute to something involving organized criminal elements, and that raises the stakes dramatically.
So let's start at the very beginning. Let's set the scene. And really the operational hub for their business. The documents are very precise here. They say the disruption, this calculated disruption, began...
When detailed in the documents, it shows a really insidious strategy. The founder, who the police statements called Jess, she was first approached by an associate of an OMC, and they were trying to cultivate what the document calls a false friendship.
So like a reconnaissance mission?
Pretty much. Masked as just, socializing.
That's classic grooming behavior, isn't it? Establish trust just so you can breach it. But the situation escalated really fast from that subtle infiltration to, well, a physical compromise of the space.
It did. The documents clearly state these. These organized criminal elements moved directly into an apartment located, and this is key, directly opposite the founder's own unit.
Directly opposite, so it's not random.
Not at all. It's fascinating because of that physical proximity. It just eliminates the ability to escape or even just ignore the threat. By moving in right across the hall, they created what the documents later call a hostile environment.
Turning her private home into a cage under constant surveillance.
That's a good way to put it. Spatial oppression. And then the documents outline the next level of escalation. Police raids started happening.
At their apartment across the hall.
Right. And because the criminals were operating right there, they got desperate. They actually tried to use the founder's own apartment as a place to hide during these raids.
Unbelievable.
And it gets worse. When their original unit across the hall became too, let's say, hot because of police attention, because they didn't leave the building.
No.
They just pivoted. They took over a second apartment, one that was conveniently unlocked, on the very same floor.
And they just moved in.
They changed the locks, declared it their new base of operations, and this is critical. The documents allege their stated purpose was, and I'm quoting, to terrorize Jess from taking over her life 24/7.
Wow. That detail, that seals the link between the location and the fact that it was impossible to work.
It does. You just can't run a business, especially one that needs clear thought, creativity, customer interaction. You can't do that when your workspace, which is also your home, has been invaded. Every moment, waking or sleeping, becomes a potential threat scenario.
So the sources established a complete compromise. This wasn't competition. This was an internal siege. Okay, so once that proximity was established, how did it escalate into the weaponized intimidation that forced the pause?
This is where we get into the really specific acts of violence. They're detailed mostly in the police report. And these are not vague threats. These are what the founder called her aha moments, the clear signs that her life was in immediate danger.
And the details they're harrowing. They really speak to a deliberate campaign of terror designed to just psychologically break her. We're talking about a gun being pulled in the building lobby.
Right. And then it gets even more personal, an even more intimate threat. A gun shown directly to the founder while she was inside her own apartment.
Think about the psychological barrier that crosses. The threat is no longer distant. It's right there, in the one place you're supposed to be safe.
Exactly. Tactile and immediate.
Yeah.
But they didn't just stop with firearms.
No. And this might be one of the most shocking acts that's cited. The element of just raw physical menace. A chainsaw. A chainsaw being held.
It's so easy to just read that phrase, a chainsaw at the door,
Mhm.
and move on. But the documents really emphasize the sheer physical and, it's aggressive. It signifies this immediate visceral threat of, well, of dismemberment. This moves it from just intimidation to open psychological warfare.
And the verbal threats reinforce that. The founder was subjected to direct threats about disappearance, even murder for a release.
Which created a state of, quote, overwhelming fear for my safety. The sources are extremely explicit about the result of all this. The business was paralyzed by trauma.
The internal statement, a truth you need to hear, that really gives you the clinical assessment of the toll, doesn't it?
It does. The founder confirms they were living in a state of literal shock and survival mode. They were dealing with the tail end of an extremely traumatic 6 months of harassment.
What's truly fascinating to me is analyzing the operational conflict of values that this trauma created. I mean, she was running a business that was all about freedom, connection, and fun.
Right. Events and services designed to bring people joy. Community.
It's an impossible contradiction.
Completely. How can you be the face, the engine of a business based on connection and positive energy when your own reality is a, quote, real-life nightmare of constant surveillance and weaponized intimidation?
You can't. The very essence of the business, her ability to just engage with people, was completely undermined by her personal trauma.
So the decision wasn't about profit or strategy. It was about physical and mental survival. She had to pause operations because she needed to, and this is another quote, start working through the very real and serious trauma of being intimidated and feeling unsafe.
So the professional life was dismantled by the personal trauma. The psychological distress is it's fundamentally incompatible with running a business like that. The closure was mandatory.
It was.
Which brings us directly to the evidence of that forced public pause. We're moving into Section 3 now, looking at the public statements which serve as proof from that exact time that safety was the sole driver.
And this is where the paper trail becomes just ironclad. The public notice, a personal message from Ally, Ally being her public-facing name. That's the formal declaration.
And the language in it just removes any doubt about the cause. The statement reads, "This decision was not made lightly. I was forced into a corner. This move is a safety and well-being requirement." I mean, if you're looking for proof of non-commercial reasons, that's your smoking gun.
It is. She later admitted in the filings, there was a point where it became clear to me, I can't continue to run events while feeling unsafe. And that's critical, because running events meant more visibility, attracting crowds, potentially putting customers in danger.
Escalating the threat.
Exactly. So the ethical choice was to shut down. It was mandatory.
But this is where the tragedy turns financially brutal. The documents explain that this necessary pause immediately turned a viable business into a distressed asset, an asset that the harassers essentially succeeded in exploiting.
That's the chilling connection, isn't it? The criminal intimidation creates the need to pause. That pause immediately signals vulnerability to the market. Then a buyer appears, offering what was called a lifeline. But the offer was only made after the business was already in distress because of the safety crisis.
The criminal actions led directly to the vulnerability, which led directly to the forced sale. The end result, as it's stated in the documents, was the complete loss of the founder's entire livelihood.
And if we step back and look at the bigger picture here, the sources establish the financial loss, the total destruction of the business, as a direct and measurable damage caused by the criminal conduct. This just completely undercuts any argument that it was a failure of the business model itself.
Right. The business model was fine, the personal environment was not.
Precisely.
That distinction, commercial failure versus criminal dismantling, is so important. It really crystallizes the three-step sequence the documents prove. First, criminal associates move in and intimidate. Second, the founder loses the ability to operate safely. And third, the business is paused solely for self-preservation, which results in the financial collapse.
And this brings us to a really complex part of the case, the allegations against the building management. Because the documents don't just focus on the OMC associates. They raise some serious questions about how the environment was allowed to get so bad.
The founder states that the building management's negligence and potential co-conspiracy only became clear later on. And the sources allege specific instances of clear ongoing interference by managers, specifically aimed at stopping the founder from reporting these incidents or from securing evidence.
Yeah, this elevates the issue way beyond a simple neighbor dispute. The documents specifically mention obstruction of investigations and deliberately preventing her from getting the evidence she needed to pursue justice. The source claims that criminal conduct was, quote, clearly allowed by building management.
The implication of that, when you think about it, is just staggering. Not only were criminals actively trying to destroy her ability to work and live safely, but the very entity responsible for building security was allegedly, at minimum, obstructing any attempt to fix the problem.
These are very serious allegations, and they compound the initial criminal threat. It suggests the environment was hostile on two levels: the direct threat from the criminals, and then this institutional lack of support, or even active obstruction for the people who should have been the first line of defense.
So, when we pull all this evidence together, the specific threats, the mandated pause, the obstruction, what does it all mean when we summarize the documented damages?
Well, the sources simplify the damage into three key areas, all proven by the paper trail. First, the safety threat. Criminals set up a base and directly intimidated the founder at her home. Pretty straightforward. Second, displacement. She was mentally and physically unable to leave home or operate safely because of the constant surveillance, the violence, the fear.
And crucially, the third point, the financial loss. The business was paused solely to preserve human safety, which resulted in the documented loss of her entire livelihood. The documents prove the business closure was a survival tactic, dismantling a livelihood from the outside in.
The entire narrative is just a chilling demonstration of how external, non-commercial violence can sever the link between a person and their business. It's a complete operational collapse, given not by debt or bad ideas, but by the absence of foundational security. There's a situation the police draft summarizes starkly. I can't see a path forward until this is properly addressed.
That really hits home. This whole deep dive shows that for small or founder-led businesses, especially ones using a home as a key asset, the physical security and mental well-being of that founder is, in fact, an essential, unpriced business asset. When that asset was compromised, the business immediately became defunct.
Absolutely. The sources really compel us to view the security of one's home and person as an inseparable part of professional operations. The founder was the business. And if the founder is in survival mode, because of a chainsaw at their door, the business cannot function.
Which raises an important question, something for you to carry forward and mull over. We usually calculate operational risk based on, market dynamics, supply chain issues, technology. But if even a thriving business can be instantaneously silenced by a hostile physical environment, if your home is compromised, how widely applicable is this idea of external physical safety as an essential, unpriced business asset?
It forces a massive reevaluation of what true operational risk even is. What other unseen prerequisites like privacy or psychological stability or just general community safety do we all take for granted when we calculate business success or failure? Things beyond the standard market forces.
The evidence here suggests that the most critical infrastructure for any business might not be the cloud server or the supply chain, but the safe, secure, and uninterrupted ability of its founder to simply exist. Something to think about the next time you define risk in your own operation.
Indeed. Until the next deep dive.